Hi, my name is Auburn Barrett, and I'm a senior athletic training student here at Emory. And my senior research project was entitled High School Student Athlete to Collegiate Student Athlete. Are you ready? And so, I'll just give you a brief overview. I'm going to go over my clinical question and why I wanted to do this. I also am going to talk about some previous research and the subjects I used, the survey that I used, results, limitations, delimitations, my conclusion, and suggestions for further research. So my clinical question was, does high school athletics prepare you for the stress of collegiate athletics? And I came to this question by, I was doing clinical experience with the women's volleyball team here at Emory, and a lot of the freshman athletes that had injuries, sustained injuries here, expressed concern that they've never had an injury before coming to college. So I decided that maybe there was something when coming to college that caused them to sustain this injury. So I wanted to look at it further and see what could potentially cause this. So previous research, the DIII study was done in 2004, and it actually did look at transition for first-year students, female student athletes, and it came to the conclusion that social support at the beginning of their time at college was very crucial to them having coping mechanisms then at the end of their first year here, or as a student. And also it looked at how coping strategies were vital for first year students, but you develop those coping strategies while you're in school. You don't come to school with those, but you develop those while you're in there. The Iverson study was done in Sweden on senior soccer players. There were 48 male soccer players in 3 different teams, and they gave them a questionnaire and also had the athletic trainer at the time report injuries that caused them to at least miss 1 day of practice or competition. And they found that 4 different traits had a predictor for risk of injury, and those were somatic trait anxiety, psychic trait anxiety, stress susceptibility, and trait inability. And that was done in 2010. And the Steffen study, it was done in 2009, and it was done on girls soccer players, ages range from 14 to 16, and it was done over an 8-month period. And they noticed that high stress, poor coping skills, or low social support seemed to be at a greater risk. They seemed to be at a greater risk for injury if they had those traits. So my subjects, I sent an email to 30 student athletes. The qualifications for these student athletes were they had to be first year fall athletes, and that includes volleyball, men's and women's cross country, and men's and women's soccer. I excluded football just because there is a lot of first year football players, and I felt that would skew the male to female ratio. So I decided not to include them. And I chose the first year fall athletes just because they have to come to college and start their sport right away, instead of being able to come to college, acclimate to the collegiate lifestyle, and then start their sport. So I thought that would be kind of interesting to see how they could adapt to the college lifestyle while they're in their sport. So my survey was comprised of 4 different surveys that I found throughout my research. So the perceived stress scale, it's 14 questions that talk about an experience they've had in the past month. And it's scored on, half of them are scored 0 to 4, which 0 being they never experienced the question, or 4 being they experienced it very often. And half of them were scored from 4 to 0. So 4 would have been never experienced, and 0 being experienced very often. The sport anxiety scale was a 15 questionnaire, and it had 3 different types of questions. The 3 types of questions were worry, somatic, and concentration disruption. And this was scored on a 1 to 4 scale, which 1 being not at all, they haven't experienced it at all, and then 4 being they experienced it very much. The athletic coping skills inventory, that is 28 statements that consist of just how they cope with different types of stresses, and they were instructed to just not think about the question, just answer how they, like what first came to mind. And that was scored from 0 to 3, with 0 being almost never and 3 being almost always. And the last one was the life event survey for collegiate athletes, and that was a 56 event survey, but I condensed that to questions throughout that I thought were relevant to first year athletes, because there was some like marriage, and I didn't feel like those were really relevant in other types of questions. So I condensed that down, and I scored it on a total score, and then I also scored it on negative impact that it had and a positive impact it had. So the range is like from -4 to 1, and that would be if it negatively influenced them. And then +1 to +4 was if it was a positive influence on them. And then to get the total score, you just did the absolute value of the negative score and combined it. And those were like extremely negative to somewhat negative, and then like somewhat positive to extremely positive. And then other questions I included were previous injuries, such as if they've had any injuries like in high school or even before then. The sport they played, just because I wouldn't know like what sport. I wanted to see who all answered, and the injuries that they sustained while they've been in college, and other high school sports that they played, to see if that would be an impact, and if they played club sports. So my results, I only got 11 responses out of the 30, and I had to actually exclude one of them because of inconclusive data that I had with that one. So here you can see, like, I put them in different, like, male, female, sport, club. Here's the positive, negative, and total. And then this is, like, somatic, worry, concentration disruption, and total. And I laid it all out and color-coded, like, each answer to who answered what, so I could see if there was a trend. And then I also, like, put them in order to where, like, the lowest number to the highest number, to see if there was any correlation between the highest number, or the lowest number and the highest number in injuries in college. And so I used a Pearson correlation as well to see if like there was like one caused the other. So if injuries caused the stress or stress caused the injuries. And I didn't have any correlation like between like any significant correlation, except the total sport anxiety scale and the total somatic score in the sport anxiety scale. They both they were both approaching significance when I did it. Limitations and delimitations. Limitations, I had a small sample size, which even if I did get all 30, that still would kind of be a limitation, because it is just only 30 people, which is hard to do a correlation. And sending the survey via email, it was kind of hard to know like when they completed it, if they were under stress when they completed it, if they were just clicking buttons just to get through the survey. I have no idea, like, knowing. And athletic coping skills inventory 27, when I was analyzing and adding up the total, I realized that I accidentally left out one of the questions on the athletic skills inventory 28, so mine was actually a 27 questionnaire. Delimitations, I did not include the freshman football players. Like I said, there's just so many first year football players, and I didn't want to skew any like male to female ratio or anything. Other surveys, I found other like daily hassle surveys and other sport anxiety surveys, but I didn't want to include them just because it would be, the survey would be way too long, and it would definitely discourage people from taking it. Which I included, the surveys I included have been found in many different studies, is why I included those. And I only chose first year fall athletes at Emory and Henry, and so that would be a delimitation where I could have expanded to other D3 schools or even D2, D1. So my conclusion is my results were inconclusive. There wasn't really any trend. Like, I saw one trend where if you had like a lower somatic score, they had an injury in college, and I saw there was more like chronic injuries than acute, but nothing really stood out. And so I feel like more research needs to be done on this topic. And so for future research, I suggest that there would be a larger sample size. And also for them to look at different schools as well as different divisions. Because I mean, we go to a liberal arts school, which is hard enough. We have like a core curriculum, whereas somebody that might go to a state school might not have as hard classes as we do. So maybe comparing different divisions along with different schools. And comparing like winter and spring to the fall athletes to see if they have the same exact like stress levels and injuries than us, or like than the fall athletes, and also like stress levels throughout the whole season, because I just did mine like when the season ended, so maybe like seeing throughout like their whole first year to see if it changes at all and comparing it to the injuries. Any questions? Dennis?
I just have one. Your study was basically 4 individual surveys or questionnaires, and you hit on this a little bit. Anytime I see a survey or questionnaire used, the first thing that always pops into my mind is the reliability, validity of that questionnaire. Did you find that all 4 of these instruments have been proven to be reliable, valid for what you wanted to find?
I saw that the life event survey, the coping, that was used in like, I think it was 3 to 4 different studies that I found. So I figured like a lot of them mentioned that too as well. So I figured that would, like, they showed that it was consistent, like they had consistent results, and also with the athlete coping skills inventory. And then a couple of, like, I found a couple other ones on the other 2 surveys, but they weren't as like direct as those 2. Those 2 were the big ones that have been used throughout like a lot of the studies that I found. Not anyway.
You came in as a freshman. When you came in, you were playing tennis,
Yes.
right? Okay. And then you chose to no longer play tennis when you got here.
Yes.
Do you think that had to do with the stress and the
Not at all.
No?
No, it was just athletic training. Like I figured athletic training was more important for me to focus on than tennis, because this is what I want to do with my life, and tennis was just something extra.
Amen.
That's beautiful.
I don't know that this is necessarily a question, but maybe a suggestion for the future if you choose to continue this research avenue. As opposed to a Pearson's R, had you done a stepwise regression, you could have controlled for gender and even been able to take a look at whether, obviously, our culture has places a difference in how genders handle things, and I think that would have been an interesting dichotomy to look at. You could have done that in the same kind of avenue. Might be a suggestion, and then you wouldn't have to worry as much about your sample population in terms of male female. I think that would be interesting.
I like realized at the end that I didn't like compare the male to female, and like I had 7 females and 3 males, so that would kind of been like a little probably skewed too, but it would have been interesting to see like if it was different at all.
But just switching that up would allow you to sort of do both and give you a picture of whether these things contributed to a model, particularly if you're looking at prediction of injury. I think would certainly be an interesting.
Yeah, it'd be something to look at. Any other questions?
All right.